that fear, whatever it may be, can you really show it to me, point it to me, grab it? You can't. It's something that we create in our mind that has us be fearful. So once you start to recognize that fear is this thing that's trying to protect me, that's trying to help me to survive, and it's not really helpful in that way, it gives you some more power over that fear than the fear having power over you.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to the Life Inner Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo. On the Life Inner Show, we help people make more, work less, and live awesome lives. I'm joined by Polish Peter as my co-host. Hey, dude.
I got scared.
What in the world? Dude, I don't.
That was my interpretation of being scared and fearful. I don't know how well it worked out. I saw you on the screen and I'm like, what the hell?
Right.
I got scared looking at you.
All right. Well, I guess that's a very poor introduction to this episode, but we'll go with it, man.
Best what you can get right now. That's the best you get.
That's all you're getting. So let's talk about, man. So we're gonna talk about fear in this episode. Man, I feel like fear holds more people back from everything they can accomplish more than anything else. Like really, it's all comes down to fear, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many anything in life, whether it's
totally.
Relationships and people and health and business and stepping out of your own self to be more impactful in life, whatever it might be. I think the biggest stop that makes people stop is fear. And we just had a really good example at one of our last events that we just had at the beginning of February, the Get-A-Life Getaway. And we do this exercise at the event where we basically help people break through the fear. So we had a pretty impactful example at this particular event, a little bit different than most what we typically do, didn't we?
Yeah, man, it was. So just to let the cat out of the bag in this. So one of the exercise Peter's referring to is we have people eat fire at the event. And we'll ask people like who's significantly let fear hold them back in life. And we kind of talk through some of those things and we kind of help people through those. And then we'll select a couple people usually to come eat fire. And in this particular case, we had two people come up and there's, I want to frame this correctly. Like, so we had two people come up. And there's a lot of lessons that we try to pull out of this exercise, by the way. It's not just overcoming fear, but it really is very valuable teaching tool for the people that are watching as well, right? It's actually funny because sometimes people in the audience are just as scared, if not more scared than people at the front of the room.
And it's a good metaphor for life.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like watching other people. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So it is such a great metaphor. So the first person who goes up there, and this is the first time it's ever happened. I told them like, hey, so we're gonna have you eat fire. And by the way, they don't know when they go up there. And so by the way, if you ever come out to a Get-A-Life Getaway, don't tell anybody about this because there might be people in that room that don't know what we're about to do, and we don't want you to give it away, okay? And so this is our secret, right? So
good thing that there's only two people listening to this podcast because the secret is going to stay.
Yeah, your mom and my dog. Yeah, exactly. So here we go. So this woman comes up. She practiced with the fire, with eating fire before it was lit. But as soon as it was lit, that's when she decided she didn't want to. And so the practice run was fine. She's like, there's no fire on here. And I instructed her, hey, this is what you do. Now it's the exact same thing when the fire is on there. But as soon as she saw the flame, she got paralyzed. And listen, it is fair because listen, I was a volunteer firefighter for over 4 years. And when I first did this exercise, it is terrifying to see a ball of flames coming at your face. And so there's no blame here at all. But she got paralyzed.
She literally physically stepped back.
Yeah. She did. As soon as I lit it, she stepped back. She wasn't even like holding it. She as soon as she saw that fire, she stepped back. And she's like, no, I'm not doing it. I said, cool. Like, listen, we're not here to make you feel uncomfortable or to force you or do anything like that. And so I said, well, how about this? Let's do this. And this is, I want you to follow along with some of the lessons that are occurring right here. So what I did is I lit it and then I took my hand and I extinguished it. And I said, and I asked the audience, I said, should the flame go out, by the way, if she were to put it in her mouth, would the flame go out? And everybody says, yes, because there's no oxygen. I'm like, right. So we know intellectually that this will work out. But there's an emotional reaction that prevents us from taking that action. Like, and I want to ask you, if you're listening right now, like how many times have you let the emotional side of things dominate the intellectual side of things, right? Like, so we're not kind of acting out of what we know is the likely outcome. Where we're acting out of fear. And so I said, okay, so we know this is going to go out, but she still didn't want to do it. And then I said, okay, how about this? I'll extinguish it with my hands. She saw me do it a couple times. And I said, how about
Granted, you do have meaty hands, dude. I mean, show the audience your hand. I
right,
mean,
right.
that's
I do have man
yeah.
paws, so it's a little bit of an unfair advantage. But I said, well, how about this? Like, would you feel comfortable doing that? And at first she was like, no, I don't want to do that. And so I said, okay. So I took a couple steps back. We started talking about that a little bit more. I finally got her to agree to put it out with her hand. And by the way, we started off with a super, super small flame. So I said, okay, so we're gonna burn some of this off. We're gonna be a really, really tiny flame. And then she did it. And then we did a larger flame, and she did it. And that's where she felt comfortable, and that's where she stopped. But before we get to the second person, let's talk about a little bit more about this. So she met fear, and she overcame fear to a degree that was palatable for her. It was still scary because it was like, listen, she was still scared to put her hand on that flame, which is again understandable.
Hmm.
But she still did something, man, and she still took, and rather than just going to sit down and not doing anything, right? She did stretch herself, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, I imagine moving forward, if she were to have that, time to be able to do this again, she might take another step further back because now she already, grabbed it and extinguished with her hand. So maybe it's something more, the next step of it, right? Uh, maybe it's I don't know, extinguishing with both hands at the same time, or then you actually go and try to eat the fire. But the point I'm making with all this is sometimes fear is bigger than we make it out to be.
Yeah,
And the more we keep thinking about it and because think about it, that conversation with you and her took a while longer than it typically does.
it did.
So
Yeah.
it's bigger conversation. It's there for a longer time. You think about it more often. And there's a whole bunch of images that are probably flying to your head as you're thinking about what this may or may not do. And the analogy with that is how often do we do this in life? When we were looking at making some kind of a choice in life to basically, whether it's a relationship, whether it's business, whether it's making the phone calls because you're a real estate investor, you need to make phone calls to get you the next deal or finding the private money. And you're looking at this phone and you're trying to pick it up. And for some reason, you can't. Well, you dial and then you hang up immediately because you're worried what's going to happen. Like this other person might yell at you or they're going to make you feel like you're, less of a human or whatever it might be. And all of a sudden, that fear, the emotion kicks in and takes over rather than logic that think about this person might be in, 10 miles away from you. What are they going to do? Nothing, really. You know what I mean? They're just saying different things. So when we start looking at that fire exercise, there are so many lessons that we hope that the audience gets out of this, not only the participant, but the audience itself, that how you can actually break through that fear. So let's maybe talk about what are some, unless you want to go and talk about the
Well,
second woman first, because
not yet,
before we
man.
start talking about lessons.
There's one more thing I want to pull out of this is like, so, and by the way, the second woman did get up there and she ate the fire. And we'll pull out the lessons from that in a second. I didn't want to keep you in suspense. But the lesson I really want you to take from the first woman was that she took a step. And so what Peter mentioned before, let's say you want to start a huge business, right? And you get all these things going. What is that first obstacle, the first thing that's a little bit scary that you can do? You don't have to go for the whole thing right off the bat.
Mhm.
Like, what's a bite-sized chunk that you can conquer, that you can overcome, that you can take your fear, put it aside, and take that step forward anyway? Because by the way, I'm not saying you're not ever going to be fearful. I'm saying you're going to do it anyway, right? Like, I have no doubt that everyone who's ever done this exercise with us has felt fear, but they did it anyway.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of what fear is overcome. It's not about, like just never being afraid. It's about doing it anyway. And so this woman found that first thing that was a stretch for her that she was afraid of, and she did it anyway. And so that's a great metaphor for just doing that one thing to get the ball rolling so that The next step will reveal itself. Then you have that fear to conquer. And that's cool. Like, that's fine. It's sequential. You don't have to do the whole thing right from the start. And so she taught me a great lesson about just doing, some part of action that, will move you in the direction of what you're ultimately trying to achieve. So I thought that was really cool. And by the way, yeah, it took a lot longer than we thought it would, but it's great. It was a great opportunity for us to kind of unpack this. And we really talked about it with the audience and with her, and she felt great about it. We felt great about it. And so, like, it was cool.
I think that the reason why she didn't get the, was able to eat that fire, it was actually the teacher. I think that was the problem.
Yeah, it could be. It could be, man. But I've never seen you do this exercise. I'm just curious, man. What's the deal behind? Is there a fear behind that?
No, we can do that exercise coming up. I mean, let's be honest. Like, let's talk about fear. How did that exercise start for you? You want to talk about that? How that and the whole thing started?
Yeah,
want to reveal that?
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to talk about that, dude, you were the guinea pig. I mean, I. I will not lie about that. Yeah, you were the first one, man.
So, and as I remember still to this day, your hands shaking.
Oh,
you're
right,
shorter than me, so I was worried about my eyebrows and everything, and then we were behind the hotel, next to the big garbage can, so I was worrying about that catching fire.
I was more concerned about your hairspray actually catching on fire than anything else. Like, that
back then really there was still that was a hairspray back there, so that could have been an issue. Yeah. So listen, let's get back to the conversation.
Come on. Yeah, this is a serious conversation, man.
Right, because here's the thing. Fear is always going to be there, because think about this: your body is made to be able to do that. I don't know if any of you heard of this thing called fight or flight mode, but there is something built into you that has you be able to go and deal with life when there are some scary situations. So the fear is not going to go away. You just have to learn how to break through it, go around it, over it, wherever, in spite of the fact that it might show up. Because when you have a ball of fire coming at you, or you have somebody yelling at you, or you have this, idea like you just mentioned that you want to build this new business. What we tend to typically do, people do, is we start to thinking about all the different things that may or may not happen in the future when we are, building this big business and, all those kinds of things. And that is fear talking, as opposed to just looking at taking literally the next step and the next step. And then the other aspect of it, I think that's really important, is this idea, where focus goes, energy flows. Because in that exercise, one of the most powerful reasons that people are able to go and eat the fire, because their focus is shifted to something else besides the flame.
Hey, we'll get right back to our episode, but before we do that, we want to tell you about something super special and important that I want to make sure you know about, and that is our Life and Air events. There are two in particular that I want to draw your attention to. One is called the Get-A-Life Getaway, and we've been doing this for almost 15 years now. Peter and I have been doing this together for about 8 years together, and then we have our Business Builder Workshop. And this is why it's so important, because if you don't have the ideal life you want, guess what you need? A vision. A vision is something that we create at the Get-A-Life Getaway. And listen, it takes us a full 3 days to do that. And so we've been doing this for so long. We've refined the process. We've perfected it. We've walked almost 10,000 people through this process, and we want to show you this process. Now, yeah, you could probably try and do it on your own, but why would you try and reinvent the wheel? Let the experts, let us hold you hand in hand through this process. Peter and I teach these personally. You're getting this right from us. And that's the first part of this equation. Now, the second part is like, hey, let's say you decide that you want to work 20 hours a week and you need to make $100,000 to live your vision. Well, guess what? We teach you at the Business Builder Workshop. Exactly that. We will walk you hand in hand and show you our proven process to remove you from your business, to help you make the money you want, to enable you to own your business rather than have it own you. Peter, these events are awesome, man.
Oh yeah, we do these throughout the event, throughout the years, and we're doing them throughout the country. So head over to one of these events, because you'll be surprised how amazing it is to write your vision for your life. I wish somebody would have told me this 10 years ago to do that. When I came here to this country, I had no freaking clue what a vision is, whether to actually write it. So the fact that you're sitting here on this podcast and hearing this message, I would encourage you that this is something that you would go ahead and do that sooner than later. So how do they go about doing that, Wojo?
Well, and Peter, not only that, but we have a very special offer for them. because you are a loyal podcast listener. I know you're tuning in every single week, hanging on every word. You've given us reviews, especially ratings, thumbs up, told your parents about it, your mom, your dad, your dog, your neighbor. We are giving you a 50% off, 50% off special offer. So you'll go and choose either the Business Builder Workshop or the Get-A-Life Getaway. Like Peter said, we do these all over the country. We do about a half dozen of these events per year. And when you check out, after you choose which event you want to attend, then you will enter the promo code PODCAST. PODCAST. Podcast is your promo code. You'll instantly get 50% off. And we will see you at an event soon. Now, here's my advice. Don't wait to attend this. Don't wait to register. Put it on the calendar now. Go right now. Pause the podcast if you have to. Go open a browser. Go to lifeinair.com. Enter that podcast promo code at checkout, and we will see you at an event soon. Let's get back to the episode. The only way to overcome fear, I think, or the best way I should say, is by doing the thing that you're afraid of. Like, you can think about it all day long, like, oh, I shouldn't be scared. You know, you want to learn how to do a backflip. You can think all day long you shouldn't be scared, but until you land 100 of them, you know, and you have the confidence in it that you can do this, like that's where the fear goes away. So I think waiting to do something that you're afraid of is hurting you more than helping you, because I believe time is fear's greatest ally. And you may have experienced this for yourself in the past, where, you know, you think about something and it just becomes bigger, it becomes more scary, and it just grows in your own mind, right? Like, it just becomes its own little entity. And so, like, I think taking action sooner rather than later, and then again, smaller versus this huge thing is the way to kind of overcome this. Now, what you were just alluding to is, like, you know, some of the lessons with focus. Almost in every case where we've had somebody do this, one of the ways we ask people, you know, how they were able to overcome this, and, you know, you have this ball of flames coming at your face, and they just say, like, hey, I trusted you to walk me through this, and I just focused on your instructions. And so I by the way, I'm not just having them do it on their own. Like, I'm guiding them, I'm helping them, I'm kind of like, you know, making sure this is done correctly so no one gets hurt. And because, listen, somebody could get hurt doing this, right? And life's like that too. And so they focus away from the flames, and instead they're focusing on, like, what are the action steps I need to do, and that I'm following directions.
Yeah. So, I mean, focusing on the voice, you know, focusing on what the instruction is, listening. Literally, think about it this way. Your mind, and I have this conversation a lot with women, they have this discussion where I can think about so many different things at once. But I have yet somebody to prove to me that at a specific moment, in a very moment, you can focus on two different things at once. It's impossible for you to think of two separate things at once in that same moment. You can jump really quickly, but it's impossible for you to focus on two different things. So if that's the case, when you start focusing on, let's say, the instructions, you know, and listening to what Wojo's saying, or you start looking at, you know, how he's guiding the arm, or he's focusing on the arm and those kinds of things, what happens? You stop focusing so much on the flame, and the process just walks through it. How is that applied to life? Well, think about whatever is the scary thing for you. What do you typically focus on? When it's scary, whether it's heights, whether it's you know, spiders or snakes, or it's you know, making that phone call or growing that business, what are the thoughts that are going to your head? What are you focusing on? What's the energy that you bring into it? Because that is going to tell you a lot of why this thing is so scary, because most of the time you're probably focusing and thinking about the worst case scenario in that moment. And you have this picture in your mind that has you go, you know, oh my God, this, you know, it's the snake is so, he's going to bit me, I'm going to die, or whatever it might be. So there is those kinds of conversation that happens. Now, when you start to shift that focus to something else, it becomes something more empowering. It becomes a lot easier to help you guide. That's why a lot of times, you know, when it comes to coaching, I think it's so effective, because you have a coach coming alongside of you to be able to help you, guide you. And you put some, you know, you think that this guy knows what he's doing because he's been there, done that. So you go and have him help you, guide you along the way. So you're listening to him, you're focusing on him, you keep coming back to him, and being coachable in that regard, because that's the next thing that I think is really important when it comes to this fear, is being coachable is a big aspect to it as well. So that's why I think coaching works so well, because that coach can help you alleviate some of that fear that you might have, right in front of you most of the time.
Well, you're borrowing the confidence of somebody else who's experienced this, right? And so they
Right.
already know how to do it, or they already know the risks. They already know, the things to look out for. And it's the same with like the mastermind, for instance. And that's why we structure ours as a mastermind and a coaching program together, because other people have also gone through that. And sometimes I think it's easy for someone to say, like, oh, it's easy for you, you're a coach. But when you see your colleagues and your friends doing it as well, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, gosh, I could do it too then. And so that's one of the benefits of that. I think one other really valuable part to look at this is like, and this is one of the reasons why we have a vision, is because your vision can help you get past the fears. So I'll use an illustration. So Steve Cook, when he first started real estate investing, you would never know this today, by the way. First 2 years, he did 102 or 104 deals. But it's really funny because there was a failure to launch period before that where Steve was terrified to do a deal. Again, you would never guess this. He was terrified to do a deal. He said he would meet up with one of his accountability partners. I can't remember if it was one or two other people there.
Mm-hmm.
They'd meet at lunch and they'd talk about real estate, but no one really did anything. And then finally, he realized that the fear of making that offer, of getting that property and not knowing what to do with it, was paling in comparison to the feeling of looking back in 5 or 10 years and never having done a deal and still being in the same place. And so his vision, the fear of what he'd be sacrificing long term, was more compelling to him to take action versus the short term fear of making that offer, of getting the deal, of asking the girl out, of whatever it is you're afraid of. And so that's where I kind of want you to also continue consider focusing. Like, what are the long-term consequences of things you're giving up if you don't do this thing, right? Or maybe it's the other way around. Like, maybe if you continue to do something that's hurting you, what's the likely outcome of that? Like, what's the fear of, like, if you're afraid to quit a bad habit, what are you potentially looking at in the future as a result of that bad habit of not quitting it, right? So you can kind of leverage these kind of vision items to help you take action in a way that is empowering to you and is giving you the results you're looking for.
Yeah, the other aspect to it, I think it's a really good point, because I think vision is huge, because most of the time people are afraid to take action because they don't really know what's on the other side, where they're going. So the other aspect that I think it's important to mention is, when it comes to the fear, sometimes what we think is the fear is actually not the fear. What I mean by that is, like you mentioned this example of this woman who was, I think you were having conversations with her, and she was working a lot 24/7, and she wanted to have a relationship. And the thing is, she kept working so much because what she was worried about, if she stopped working so much, she will have to actually have time to go and find that relationship. And she was afraid of, that actually getting
Yeah,
hurt,
rejection, right?
rejection, and all that kind of stuff, right? So what the thing that we thought it was going to be is that, going to make less money, or that's going to, impact me negatively when it comes to working less. It was something else completely.
Yeah.
So I think it warrants for people to go, and whatever that fear they got going on, to start to unpack it a little bit, to see what really is the thing behind it that has me be fearful. And most of the time it comes back to you, about you, on you, whether it's rejection, whether it's, being alone, whether it's not being enough, whether it's being not loved, whether it's being, you know, um, all those kinds of things. And what ends up happening when you start to unpacking this thing, you start asking this question. Sometimes I tell my students, I'm like, ask this question, is it really true? Because think about it this way, that fear, whatever it may be, can you really show it to me, point it to me, grab it? You can't. It's something that we create in our mind that has us be fearful. Because think about, like, snakes. There is a ton of people who have no problem of holding a snake. I do, right? So what is it that has me be afraid of hold that snake? So something that has been created in my mind that has me stop from, whether it's a past experience or whatever it might be, that has me be fearful about this. So once you start to recognize that fear is this thing that's trying to protect me, that's trying to help me to survive, and it's not really helpful in that way. It gives you some more power over that fear, rather than the fear having power over you. If that makes any sense.
Yep.
And then you can actually start taking actions to be able to. The other aspect that, I say with fear is sometimes just a matter of just going and doing and instead like, screw it, I'm just going to do this. You know what I mean? One of the reason why it helped me, like we made a joke. I remember them. I was in Colorado when we did this behind the garbage cans. Um, one of the reasons why I was able to go and do it is one, I'm like, just screw it. I mean, if something happened and get burnt, then he's going to be by himself doing this event without me. But the thing is, there was some trust that was in there. I knew that you did never done it before, but you've watched it many times. You've thought about it, and you have this courage to go and try it out because now, guess what? Uh, Time has come because the event is coming, and we need to be able to do this. So there was a deadline in place that has you go and do it. And then the other aspect of it for me was, you know what? He's being courageous to work through whatever is going on for him. So I'm going to come alongside him and help him get through it. And then when you start bringing people into your life, right, that will help you work through this, come alongside of you, like Wojo mentioned, earlier that, sometimes colleagues of yours that can help you walk through it, it becomes a little bit easier because maybe they're supporting you. Maybe they say, listen, you got this, you can make this happen, and now it gives you a little bit more courage to go and, I'm going to do this, right? And then you make that phone call and, you come back to them and say, listen, I finally made that phone call. It sucked. The person hung up on me, but I made it. Was it as bad as you thought it was going to be? No. All right, let's make another one. And that kind of a, way of working through some stuff can be really helpful for people.
Yeah, man. I've never seen someone that's had a large degree of fear be successful in life because if you're fearful of everything, like you're just playing small. You're trying to play it safe. And again, there's nothing, I mean, I get it. Like we're wired that way, but you gotta kind of short circuit that wiring so that you can not take foolish risks, not be reckless, but do the things that frankly, are holding you back. You should be doing them. And there's no really good reason why you're not. So I hope you're going to do something with this. I hope you take something from this episode. Look for yourself. Like what are the fears that are currently holding you back? If you had to really think about like, hey, what's something I really know I should be doing? Maybe it's to ask the girl out. Maybe it's to start going to the gym, but you're afraid of failing again. Maybe it's the fear of rejection or looking silly or, whatever it is. Like look into that for yourself, do some introspection, and then do it anyway. Because that's the way you're going to overcome that fear. Get around people that are going to help you. Get around people that are going to support you, that are not just, the Chicken Littles, the sky is falling about everything, because that'll make a big difference for you. And, we want to hear about your success too. So come on over to the Life in Air Facebook group. If you're not a member yet, get in there. Tell us something about a fear you've overcome. Let us congratulate and celebrate along with you and be part of that success. Also, as always, we would love if you would leave us a rating, give us a review, share this with somebody who needs to hear it. Because guess what? Somebody right now in your life that is struggling with fear, and maybe just one little nugget they get from this episode could change everything for them, and you would be responsible for that, and you'd be that person to make them help them make that change. So as always, we greatly appreciate you tuning in. We will see you next week, everyone. Take care.